Yeah, so start thanking Steve and the team for the opportunity to present, I think, for the second year at this meeting. So I'm pleased to represent EBR Systems, and as mentioned in the introduction, we're listed on the Australian Stock Exchange, and we are less than 2 weeks away from receiving FDA approval, which is a transformational point in our company. So I'd like to start by saying, I guess my objective today is just to share why we believe we're a de-risked investment opportunity and we've laid the foundations to be a high-growth medical device company. So we've developed the world's only leadless pacemaker, and although we're to treat heart failure, and although we're participating in the cardiac rhythm management market, that's dominated by 3 major players. We don't have any direct competition. And although there are other leadless pacemakers in the market, they're used for a different indication, a different application to treat slow heart rate or bradycardia. At launch, we'll have a very large addressable market of $3.6 billion in the US alone. That'll only increase as we expand our indications and move into other markets. And I guess our pathway to market's really been underpinned by 2 key things. Firstly, we have the FDA's breakthrough device designation, and that provides us with a direct, informal communication channel with the FDA. And the second is our compelling clinical results. Our pathway to FDA approval really started a number of years ago, but our key milestones were in August last year. We submitted our 5th and final module. We then received our filing acknowledgement in 30 days rather than the customary 45. So I think that boded well for the rest of our review cycle. We had our Day 100 meeting in December, and then we completed a successful pre-approval inspection in January. And that's where the FDA comes onto your premises, inspects your manufacturing facilities, and reviews your quality systems. And we went through that with 0 observations, which is really unusual in our space. And on the back of that, we felt confident to go to the market and say we're expecting FDA approval on or before the 13th of April, as I mentioned, less than 2 weeks away. One of the other key things we have is, as a result of the breakthrough device designation, we automatically qualify for 2 reimbursement schemes in the US, NTAP and TPT, which I'll cover shortly, but they'll allow us to have an ASP of $45,000 US. And with that sort of price point, you only need to sell 2,200 units to get to that $100 million in annual revenue. So as I mentioned, we participate in the cardiac rhythm management market. It's made up of 3 segments: pacemakers for slow heart rate, implantable defibrillators for those patients at risk of sudden cardiac death, and the segment we participate, cardiac resynchronization therapy, also known as biventricular pacing. This treats a subset of heart failure patients whose left and right ventricles beat out of turn. So therapy works by pacing both simultaneously to restore that synchrony. So the Achilles heel, I guess, for the last 60 years, we've been implanting pacemakers in humans has been the leads or the wires that connect or that deliver the electrical stimulus to the heart. These can fracture, they can migrate. If the patient develops a pocket infection, those leads can actually act as a conduit to deliver the infection to the heart. An endovascular infection has around about a 30% mortality rate. So to address that, the wider markets move towards leadless pacemakers on the top right and leadless defibrillators on the bottom right. However, we have the only leadless pacemaker, which is the size of a grain of rice, that can be implanted in the left ventricle to treat heart failure. And that's because these other devices are around 20 times larger. If they were implanted into the left ventricle, which is in the arterial system, it has a tendency to clot, and that clot would inevitably lead to a stroke. So as I mentioned, although there are other pacemakers in the market, we actually see ourselves as being complementary to them, not competitive. There's a concept called pacing-induced heart failure, whereby 30% of patients who receive a pacemaker go on to develop heart failure. And we provide the only solution to upgrade these other leadless pacemakers to CRT or cardiac resynchronization therapy. So I'm just going to skip ahead quite a bit here because I'm running out of time already. 2 years ago at the Heart Rhythm Society in the US, we presented our pivotal clinical trial results. We had phenomenal outcome in our primary efficacy endpoint, which is a 16.4% reduction in left ventricular end systolic volume. That's essentially the amount of blood left in the heart at the end of the contraction phase. And that was then published in JAMA Cardiology last year. So as I mentioned, our pathway to commercialization has really been underpinned by that breakthrough device designation from the FDA, which will lead us to expect commercialization in April, 13th of April, less than 2 weeks away. Reimbursement is really key for us. As I said, we qualify for these two reimbursement schemes, NTAP and TPT, which will allow us to have that $45,000 US dollar ASP. Want to jump ahead to, so our TAM is fairly large. At launch, as I mentioned, made up of 4 significant pies. Acute lead failure, this is where they attempted to implant a lead-based CRT system and they were unable to. Chronic lead failure, this is where a patient had a functioning system and they subsequently experienced one of those lead failures that I mentioned. High-risk upgrades and leadless upgrades. And it's that leadless upgrade segment that we're going to see growing at a fairly rapid rate. But beyond that TAM, we still look to increase that. We're starting 2 clinical studies in Australia and the UK this year, which will help us transition from treating previously failed patients to becoming first-line therapy. We continue to invest in R&D. One example of that's a rechargeable battery. We'll be the first company in CRM to have a rechargeable battery that'll be still implanted but charged using induction charging. And we'll continue to expand in some markets outside the US. So the key message for me is 13th of April, less than 2 weeks away, we have FDA approval. Those 2 reimbursement schemes will kick in on the 1st of October, and that's when we begin commercialization. And maybe I'll just spend the last 60 seconds to be the 3rd speaker in a row to talk about the impact of the US election. The previous Trump administration was actually quite favorable to the medical device industry. Dr. Oz, who many will know as a celebrity doctor, he's been appointed to lead CMS. And during his Senate confirmation hearing, he reflected on his time he was working with or associated with eValve. eValve is now marketed by Abbott as the MitraClip, but his key message was it takes a long time for promising medical devices to get reimbursement, and that's his focus on that. So I think that theme will continue across, certainly for the medical device industry. I think maybe if you're a vaccine company, you might be having a little harder time, but I think we're fairly safe as a medical device company. So I'm going to be in around for the rest of the day. I skipped quite a few slides there, so if anyone would like to know any more about our investment thesis, happy to spend some time talking about that. So thank you.